Inequality, love to few, love is revolution of France. That little video is something that we're going to use and revisit time and again throughout this class. That video is going to help to display some of the major themes and major events of the French Revolution. Today, what I want to talk about is some of the inequalities that existed in France prior to the Revolution. If you look in section 1 of your book, you're going to find a copy of this cartoon. It's going to talk about and portray the three estates or the three social classes that existed in pre-revolutionary France. The three estates were the first estate made up of the clergy, the second estate made up of the nobility, and the third estate made up of the rest of the population. In your notes, what I'd like you to do is answer questions 1 and 2. We will start our conversation in our lecture tomorrow in class with this idea. The first estate in France was made up of the clergy. And the clergy during the Middle Ages exerted great influence and had great wealth. Prior to the Revolution, the Catholic Church owned about 10% of all French lands and paid no taxes directly to the state. Now, for the most part, your bishops and your abbots were usually the most well off, whereas your parish priests were just as poor as their congregation. During the Enlightenment, though, the philosophes targeted the Catholic Church and the clergy for reform. They criticized the idleness of some clergy and for political interference. The second estate was the titled nobility of French society, holding many of the top jobs in government, the army, and the royal courts. At Versailles, the French royal residence, ambitious nobles competed for royal appointments. Many nobles, though, lived far from Versailles, the center of power in French society. Though they owned a lot of land, they received little financial income, and changes in price greatly impacted their status and prestige in French society. Many nobles hated absolutism and resented the royal bureaucracy that employed men from the Third Estate to positions that had once been reserved exclusively for them. Many in the Second Estate feared losing their traditional privileges, especially freedom from paying taxes. The Third Estate was the most largest and most diverse social class in French society. At the top sat a group called the bourgeoisie, or middle class. It included prosperous bankers, merchants, and other professionals. The bulk of the Third Estate, though, consisted of rural peasants. Some were prosperous landowners, others just simply worked the land. Finally, the rest of the Third Estate was made up of urban workers. They included apprenticed and journeymen, servants, and even the unemployed. Members of the Third Estate resented the privileges enjoyed by their social betters, the First and Second Estate. Some of the bourgeoisie could have jobs, but many were still reserved for the nobles. The smallest rise in price for bread, the main food, brought about threats of great hunger and starvation. Probably the biggest problem was that the First and Second Estate paid almost no taxes, leaving the burden of funding France and its many expenditures largely upon the Third Estate. The Enlightenment ideas, though, began to make people question these inequalities of the old regime. Why should the first two estates have such great privileges at the expense of the majority? This central question will lead us to the French Revolution.